Hi friends, welcome back to our See the Light, Yes You Can Draw Club. I'm Pat Nepley, I'm your master artist. I hope you've been joining me through all of these series of art club meetings because I really want to help you become a better artist. This is Club Meeting 33 and it's called Let's Face It. Now the last time we were together we talked about balance and symmetry and how when you put those things together you'll come up with a better composition in your drawings. Do you remember the bug jar project? Well, we as humans are drawn to symmetry because God created us as symmetrical creatures. If you were to draw a line down the middle of us, you would see that we have two eyes, two ears, two arms, two hands, two legs. In fact, one side of us is just like the other, a mirror image across that dividing line. So today we're going to be working on some more about symmetry on something very specific, and that is a portrait. And a portrait is simply the depiction of a single person's face. So let me tell you what you're going to need for today's meeting. In fact, they're just some basic supplies. You should have them as part of your drawing toolkit. A couple of sheets of white paper, a regular pencil, a good eraser, I like a kneaded eraser, and a ruler. Okay, a portrait is a depiction of a single person. Now, you might have a person with a child or a person with their dog, but a portrait is simply a person. There's photography portraits. Perhaps you've done that with your family where you've gone to have your portrait taken by a photographer. But what I want to focus on is how you can draw a portrait. So let's take a look at some portraits through history because actually portraits have told us quite a lot. This first portrait was done in the 15th century by an artist named Hans Holbein, and this is called Anne of Cleves. Now take a look at this portrait. First of all, she's not very happy in this picture. And do you know why? And that's because when people had to sit for a portrait for a painter, they had to be there in that same position for a very long time. And so they didn't smile. It's too difficult to hold a smile that long. Now you'll also notice from this portrait, it tells us a lot about the time, the culture, the customs, and the dress. Look how richly brocaded her gown is, and the jewels in her headpiece and on the dress. This next portrait is also a very famous portrait. This is of our first president, George Washington. The artist was Gilbert Stuart. He actually did quite a few portraits of George Washington. And this portrait was very important because he was such a significant leader in the early colonies. And a lot of people only knew what George Washington looked like based on political cartoons that were in their local paper. So portraiture was very important for people to know what their leaders looked like. A portrait would be done and would travel from city to city, and then other artists would do drawings of the portrait they saw and print them in the local newspapers. So that portrait was very famous and in fact is one of the most famous and well-known portraits today. Okay, here's our last portrait I want to share with you, and this is actually probably the most famous work of art that everyone in the world knows, and it is a portrait. This is a young Italian woman and it was painted by Leonardo da Vinci. She was the wife of a leader named Francesco Gioconda, but everyone knows this portrait as the Mona Lisa. In fact, this portrait is very famous because people say that Mona Lisa had a slight smile. Why is that so special? As I told you before, in portraits it's very difficult for people to hold a smile for a long time. And so most portraits, people looked very serious. But the Mona Lisa has a mysterious smile, and people still talk about that in her portrait today. Okay, now for us, how do we get started? We don't have enough time to do a Mona Lisa. We're just going to focus on some basic proportions of a portrait. So take your piece of paper, put it lengthwise, and I want you to place your hand on the paper. Now I'm actually going to work larger than my hand so you can see it in camera. But what we're going to focus on today is a basic portrait so that you can understand a full-face portrait. That means someone looking straight at you, because there's actually some math and proportions involved in portraiture. Place your hand on the paper and make a little mark at the top of your hand and the bottom of your hand. And that's just going to be the size of your head on your paper. And that's a good size to work with. Now, I'm going to be working a little bit larger so you can see it. Now, you've heard me talk through all these club meetings about the importance of keeping your lines light so that you can erase. I want you to do that here too, especially since I have a feeling you're going to be doing a little more erasing as you work on getting the proportions just right. I'm going to be working a little darker so you can see it on camera. Using the guide marks that you have from where you placed your hand, top and bottom, now we're going to draw almost an egg shape, and that means the top will be wider than the bottom. So think of an oval. We talked about ovals in one of our other club meetings. So I want you to draw an oval that is wider at the top than it is at the bottom. So like an egg shape, like that. And it should meet those marks. Does it look fairly even? Is it lopsided? Maybe one side bulges out more than the other? Well, one way that you can tell, friends, is to take your paper and simply turn it upside down. Does it still look pretty even? How about even sideways? Because sometimes it's hard to tell. It looks fine when you're looking at it right side up. So once you're sure you have your egg shape and it's fairly even on the two sides, it doesn't bulge out in any weird way, what you're going to do is divide in half, half, and half again. And what that means is I want to divide from top to bottom lengthwise in half. Now, how would I know what's half? Well, you might remember this from your math class. One way to do it is to measure with your ruler. Mine is 7 inches across, so half of that would be 3.5. And I just make a little mark. But another thing you can do, friends, is use your pencil as a measuring device. Artists through the ages have done this. What you're going to do is you're going to take your pencil and you're going to mark what you think is halfway. And if I use the point of my pencil, I go to the edge of my face and I put my thumbnail there, and that's a half. Now I simply flip it. And is it half on that side? Yes. You can adjust your mark based on where you've held your marker on your pencil. So you can use your pencil as a measuring device if you don't have a ruler handy. Now again, make your lines nice and light. I'm going to make mine darker simply so you can see them, okay? So you're going to have halfway in your lengthwise for your oval. Now we're going to do halfway across. Now, how do I know that's halfway? Same thing. I use my pencil as a measuring device, put my tip, use my thumbnail, hold that. Now go to this side and see, it's half, half, and half. So I've taken the head shape and I've divided it half lengthwise and half crosswise. Now you're going to divide the bottom half in half again. So if I were to measure, that's 4.5 inches. You measure your own. It's going to be different for everyone. But if I make a mark and I'm going to check it by using my pencil measuring technique. There we go. So once I have the halfway, you make a light line. Now these are going to be guide marks for doing our portrait. Okay? Yours are going to be light because you're going to erase them when we're finished. Now the first thing we're going to put in, friends, are the eyes. And most people think that the eyes are in the top of the head. Well, they're not. In fact, they're at the halfway mark of the head because you still have forehead and hair that covers part of your head. So a young artist will often draw eyes way up here in a head, and that's just not right. Halfway on this halfway line is where we're going to draw our eyes. Now, you know that an eye is round, but when you see it, it looks like a football shape from here. So we're going to place our football shape along this line. Now, how do you know what size to do, and how do you know where to put them? Well, this takes some back and forth, and this is where drawing lightly is going to be really great for you, and have your eraser handy. Because across that eye line, you need the width of 5 eyes. Yep, you have the 2 eyes. The distance between your eyes is the length of an eye, and then the distance from the edge of the eye to your temple is another length of an eye. So it's 5 eyes across. So how do you get that right? Well, it's going to be a little bit of a guess. You're going to start by making a football shape on the eye line. Use the points of the football right on the eye line, like this. And you're going to place them where you think they would be. I know that doesn't sound very exact, but one is going to be in the middle of this side and one is going to be in the middle of this side. The problem is you're not going to get them the right size right away. After you have the two football shapes, we're going to use our measuring technique with our pencil. And I see already that the space between these eyes is too big. It should be 5 eye lengths across. One here, one here, one here, one here, one here. So I can tell that it's too short from the eye to the temple and too far between these. So I'll take my eraser. This is why we always draw lightly, and I'll move everything in. And I do my football shape on the line. Now, I'll measure my eye using my pencil technique from the tip of the pencil to my thumbnail, and I'll check the space in between the length of the eye and the distance to the temple. This one is over a little too far in. So once you get the 5 eye lengths on your eye line, the other thing you want to check, don't make your footballs too wide and don't make your footballs too narrow. It's got to be somewhere in between. Okay? Now, everyone is different. This is the cool thing. God made everybody unique. Everyone's eyes are different. So what you're learning here today, friends, is simply basic proportions. We're not trying to get a likeness of anybody that you know. But once you understand the basic proportions, then you can move on to looking at all of the great details that make up a likeness of someone. In fact, the best person to check is yourself, drawing this while looking in a mirror. So once you have the football shape, that is the outline of the eye. Now you know that we have to do the other parts of the eye. The iris is a circle, but you don't see the whole circle because there's an eyelid. So even though we know that it's going to be a circle, we're actually only going to see a portion of it, not the top and not the bottom. So think of it in terms of large parentheses. So you only see part of the iris. That's the colored part of the eye. You don't see the very top, and you don't see a little bit of the bottom. Now, the reason you don't see the whole iris is because if you're really surprised and your eyes are open big, then you would see the whole iris. And you don't want all of your portraits to look like everybody's surprised. So make sure you cut off a little bit of the top. The next part would be to make a simple line right above the football shape, and that will serve as the eyelid. Just going to make my lines a little clearer for you to see. Okay. Right in the center of your eye is actually a black hole. It looks like a dot on your eye, but it's a hole, and that's how light gets into your eye, and that's called the pupil. And right in the center, you're going to bisect the center. You're going to make another circle. Make sure they're straight ahead and make sure they're the same size on each side. Now, I don't want you to fill them in with black just yet because you want to make sure they're right before you make something solid black. It's very difficult to erase. But that is called the pupil. And again, they're right on that eye line. So those are just some basics of the eye. Now, the next step would be the nose. Now, see how we have this halfway mark? That is the base of the nose. Now, how do you know how wide the nose should be? Well, this is why getting the eyes correct is so important, because the nostril lines on the base of the nose align under the center corners of the eye. So here's our corner of our eye. If I come straight down, I'm going to make a parenthesis that lands right on this line. Same here, this is the corner of the eye. Make a parenthesis right underneath it that lands right on that line. And that is the outside, the nostrils of the nose. So if someone has really wide set eyes, they probably have a wider nose. Someone whose eyes are close set, they have a narrow nose. So right underneath the corner of the eye, that's where you're going to place these little marks. So how are we doing? You got it? I know it seems like we're going fast, but you can always go back and check again. The other part of the nose is to show the nostril. Now, friends, I know it's really tempting because you know that nostrils are openings that you're going to want to draw 2 black holes, but that's not really how you draw a nose, okay? because you don't see up someone's nose, you're looking at them from the front. So when you go to draw a nose, you're simply starting above the line, start near the parentheses, and we're making a single line that starts above. As you get to the center, dips below, and then curves back up towards the parentheses. That's it. That's just the most basic of noses. Above the line, curves down below that halfway line, then comes back up towards the parentheses. Okay. Now we're ready to do the mouth. So how do you know how wide a mouth should be? Again, the proportions of the face are all attached to the eyes. So take a dotted line, just kind of run right from the center pupil, just bring a line right down and make a little mark. And it's going to be the third of the way from the base of the nose to the chin. I'm making a little mark. That is the corner of my mouth. Under the pupil, go down, right below. That is the corner of my mouth. So if someone has wide set eyes, they probably have a broader mouth. Now once I have that little dot, what I want to do is not draw full lips. That's another mistake that young artists make, where they want to draw full lips, kind of like those wax lips you sometimes see in a candy store. Well, really, all you want to focus on when you're drawing a full face portrait is the line where the two lips meet. That is the most defining part of the mouth. So that's what we're going to focus on. A third of the way down from the base of the nose, that's this mark here, to here. I'm going to make a little mark that shows about a third of the way down. And that will be where the two lips meet. So it could be actually any kind of line, but it's usually not straight, it's usually curved. And it can curve down in the center, it can go up on the corners, it can even go down on the corners. Every face is different, but that line in between the two lips, which is not a solid straight line, that's really what we're drawing. Then when it's time to make the lower lip, we simply make a kind of a wide curved line like that, and that defines the lower lip. The lower lip is usually larger than the upper lip. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. Now I'm drawing dark, you're going to draw lightly. And that's really all you need until you determine if this is a male or a female. And then you would do more defining characteristics. Lips are more prominent usually in females than in males. And so when you're drawing, this is simply all you need. Now we're not finished yet, friends, with our basic proportions of a portrait. One of the next steps is the ears. The ear, the top of the ear, is right at the eye line. The bottom of the ear is at this line, that's the base of the nose. And it's kind of like a letter C, but you really don't want to do a backward C or a forward C. That's just way too round. So it's kind of like a very narrow and like almost like an unbent paper clip. Look at that. But it's kind of like a very narrow C. And you're going to start at the eye line and end at this line where the base of the nose is. Now on most portraits your ears are covered, right? Unless someone has really short hair, and you wouldn't see all that. And again, this is just very basic, the details of people's jawline and what their nose looks like. But this is just the basic proportions because God did design us with math and symmetry and proportion in mind. It's incredible. Now you're going to say, what about all this up there? Well, in most cases, halfway between the eye line and the top of the head is where you'd start to see hair. So for example, you could pretend that that's a part and you can bring hair down here. So you can spend some time finishing this however you want in order to get a portrait. But at least half of this portion from the eye line to the top of the head will be covered in hair. And since hair has volume and depth, it's not painted on. You don't end at this oval that you drew. You would be above it depending on how thick the hair is, or even how crazy the hair is. And those are the basics of a portrait. So for example, in this portrait here, if you look at this half, this is just the basics of the portrait. But as you spend more time, you can see I've flushed in some details of eyelashes and an eyebrow and freckles. And you can see that the hair is above the oval that is the head. It will take some time and some practice. You know, we focus an awful lot on appearance, and so when you want to work on a portrait and you really want to capture someone's likeness, it will take a lot of time in order to get it just right. Have you ever focused on your appearance, maybe spending a lot of time brushing your hair in the morning or making sure your skin isn't too dry? We do focus a lot on that. I'm so glad, though, that we have a God who does not focus on our outward appearance. He created all of us uniquely, and He enjoys what we look like because He created us. But He looks at so much more. Let me share with you a passage of Scripture that talks about just that. This is from 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, 'Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him.' The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." What a great promise, friends. That means that no matter what we look like, and believe me, we're all so different, but God looks at our heart because that's what matters to God, and that's a great promise. All right, friends, we're out of time for now. So we'll work on portraits again next time we're together in Club Meeting 34, and I think you'll really enjoy it. It'll be great fun. So I hope you'll come back and bring a friend, and I'll see you because, yes, you can draw. Bye-bye.